Welcome to The Impossible Shift. I'm your host, Jennifer Benson. Every person has a story, a moment that changed them, a challenge that tested them, a choice that shaped who they would become. On this podcast, we explore those stories through conversations about healing, identity, resilience, purpose, and personal transformation. We'll uncover the lessons that emerge when people face life's most difficult moments and choose to keep moving forward. Because transformation rarely happens all at once. It happens one choice at a time. Thank you for joining us. Let's begin. Welcome to The Impossible Shift. I'm your host, Jennifer Benson, and I am pleased to introduce Jan Shaw, who is a conscious living mentor who supports thoughtful, capable people through life transitions, identity shifts, and those moments when a life, role, relationship, work, identity, or direction that once made sense no longer feels aligned. Her work helps people move beyond surface answers, understand what may be happening beneath the surface, and begin responding to life with greater awareness, self-trust, and conscious choice. Jan's own path has included major life transitions, including leaving a successful corporate IT career to follow a more meaningful direction, moving to America in 2010 and returning to the UK in 2023. She is a certified life and executive coach and draws on tools such as human design, numerology, and hypnotherapy to support deeper self-understanding and practical insight. And Jan Shaw is a conscious living mentor who helps thoughtful, capable people navigate life transitions, identity shifts, and those moments when life that looks right no longer feels fully true. Through reflective conversation, intuitive insight, and practical self-awareness tools, she helps people recognize what may be happening beneath the surface and begin responding to life with greater clarity, self-trust, and conscious choice. Jan, welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer.
How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you.
Yes, it is such a pleasure to have you. I had a chance to look over your story, and my goodness, I was so inspired by what I got to hear. And so I just wanted to find out a little bit more about some of that stuff, like when you were talking about your story about when you were around the age of 50. Could you talk a little bit about those things that had converged around that time that pulled you towards that spirituality? Could you share a little bit more about that with us?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. It's interesting because in hindsight, it's very easy to see the clues that stacked up in terms of the direction I was meant to go. I mean, up to the age of 50, I'd lived a pretty conventional life. You know, I'd had an IT career for 24 years, starting in the olden days of COBOL and huge mainframes. And, you know, moved up the ladder, as it were. And a parallel to that, I've been a horsewoman all my life. I've been absolutely passionate about horses. And I had a horse and bought a horse, an Andalusian, which are the beautiful Spanish horses. And he had a complete breakdown. And I was basically having to rehabilitate him because he'd become very dangerous. And because I'm a researcher, I was looking at, you know, all the ways that I could actually understand his psychology, equine behaviour, etc., etc. And it was through that I came across a book called The Tao of Equus by, oh gosh, I can't remember her name now, but anyway, The Tao of Equus, which was actually a story about this woman who recovered from an abusive marriage through her Arabian horse. And, you know, I'd started it thinking, oh, this is going to give me some hints about my horse. And it turned out into a very spiritual, metaphysical book. And it talked about reincarnation. And I just had this very, very strong urge to look into reincarnation. And it really awakened my interest in spirituality, which developed into learning about consciousness. And a few years before, I was working for a consultancy company and managing a team. And I was introduced to Myers-Briggs, MBTI, personality tests. And I always laugh about this. Until then, I thought everybody thought like me, you know, because I had a couple of team members who I was really struggling with, because one was, you know, notorious for being hard to manage, and the other one was an absolute stock techie geek who just kept asking more questions, and it infuriated me. And then I went on this course, MBTI course for team leaders, and it was like this light bulb going off and understanding the different types and what their preferences were. And that was the real trigger of me getting into the psychology and also actually changing my management style as a result. And so that, it's like it started me off on this path, because it went from there into really learning about law of attraction, manifestation, which I've taught as well, but also the principles of consciousness. And that was sparked by reading A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle and learning about the ego. And it really was the catalyst for my own personal and spiritual development. Just taking a quick drink there.
Oh, yeah.
So when it came to, because this was happening in parallel, I was running a very high profile, huge project in this large, one of the biggest retailers in the UK. But I was finding that there were certain activities going on which to me were very questionable. And the culture of the company changed dramatically when a new CEO was appointed. And it went from a company that really appreciated the employees to one where the CEO was just focused on quick results, no appreciation of the efforts of the people in the business, and various other things. And I was very conscious then of purpose and of my values. And so with the situation in the company, and then me being introduced to the concept of life purpose, which I'd never even thought of before. I'd never been introduced to that concept. And so I left the company, and it took me a little while to actually find my direction, because I first started a web development business. But then I went through the dark night of the soul with some really very emotionally demanding, or even, well, let's say it was a very difficult time. And I I got to the point of actually writing my own story to help me to make decisions about what my move was, which resulted in me leaving my marriage. That was, one transition that was 5 years after I'd left the company. But also it made me actually stop and say, hang on a minute, what is my purpose? And again, the clues are there. When I look back I have an exercise, literally, what is it you're passionate about? In the roles that you've played, what are the things you've most enjoyed? And the thing I enjoyed the most about my role as a program manager was actually supporting my team members. So I would always collaborate with them when we're, designing systems and addressing requirements and everything else. And so I realised that it was the people that I was most interested in with some of the business side. But it really made me realise that was what I wanted to do. And that was when I became a coach. And it's very interesting because, I say life is a continuum. Even with a life transition, it doesn't end there.
Right.
I transitioned into becoming a coach, but then my approach to coaching evolved continuously. And I mean, recently I've changed my focus, which was still using a lot of the same principles as I'm using now, but actually with a real focus on people going through life transitions, as I had done multiple times, using, the human design, which is probably the best tool for self-knowledge, but also I'd accumulated a lot of other skills along the way as well. Like done NLP training, hypnotherapy, even timeline therapy, and also the Myers-Briggs. But it all converged into a shift from my previous branding, which was the Success Alchemist, because I actually have alchemy in my astrology and in my human design, into something that was much more focused on a very conscious spiritual approach. I mean, I don't push the spiritual approach on people if that's not an element that they want, but certainly the conscious approach to life is very much the core. And I think so many people are going through this process of questioning what they're doing in their life, because, we've all been conditioned from a very young age. It's either through external pressures, you need to do this, go to school, go to university or college, get a degree, get a good job, etc., etc. And it's kind of the expected norm. And also it's early experiences that actually install what you believe about yourself as well. And, I suffered from, a not good enough and syndrome, etc., and limiting beliefs and so on, as we all do, I think, to some degree. So it was very much, I think it's coming to the surface now that people are saying, well, hang on a minute, this is starting to not feel right. I'm not sure why, but I'm just not getting the same enjoyment out of it, or I feel like it's not what I'm meant to do, or even there's got to be more to life than this. And I think that's very much one of the symptoms of a dark night of the soul. There's got to be more to life than this. And people go through it to different degrees. But the key thing is actually trusting yourself and trusting the feelings that you have. Because, we tend to brush it aside and say, oh, no, don't be silly. You've got a good job. You're earning plenty of money. You've got this, you've got that. No, you're just being silly. But something that you ignore will start to intensify. And, I often joke about, if you're not paying attention, the universe will just give you a big kick up the butt to move in the direction that you meant to go. And so that's how I came to be a coach and mentor. And I do distinguish between the two, because the conventional definition of a coach is really just helping people achieve goals. But a mentor is much more of a guide, through experience and knowledge and skills, etc. And that's really been my approach all the time, because, I've had a lot of life experience. And interestingly, the clients that come to me have, in almost every case, had experiences that I've been through myself. So I can support them from a place of having experience of it, not just a textbook description that says if they're struggling with this, do that. And I actually use stories when I'm coaching people or mentoring people to kind of explain in a metaphorical way concepts that, are not that easy to grasp without that.
Right.
So, yeah, my focus since, I would say, about 2004 has been on living consciously, developing that level of consciousness, developing the ability to see beneath the surface. Again, the intuition, the more you trust it, the more it develops, just like any other muscle. And that's what's happened to me over the years. So that was really the kick-off to my impossible shifts, shall we say. As I say, has progressed, continued to progress over the 2 decades since then.
Jen, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure my listeners do as well. For those of you who are interested in connecting with Jen, learning more about her, you can get the information on the podcast description. I will be including her contact links there, as well as some information about her, so you can connect with her if you're curious about learning more about her. Thank you so much for joining the Impossible Shift, and we look forward to seeing you next time. For now, take care. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Impossible Shift. If today's conversation resonated with you, I invite you to share it with someone who may need to hear it. You can learn more about The Impossible Shift, explore resources, books, coaching, and upcoming projects at theimpossibleshift.com. Until next time, remember, choice is your power. I'll see you at the next episode.